Hello, my paper that I decided to do my dangerous idea presentation on was titled Getting Explicit About Implicit Racial Bias. I'm a political science major, so that means I study how power is distributed and structured within society. The reason this paper is a dangerous idea to the field is because our legal structures are idealized and often assumed to be impartial and neutral to be able to evenly distribute justice. And because we have done away with discrimination, racial, gender by outlawing them, it is problematic when we still see that these biases still affect our outcomes today in the legal system. While implicit racial bias affects most adults, here the paper focuses on judges who have a lot of power at deciding the future of people who are being charged with a crime. The paper studied judges and found that they do hold racial bias like most adults. It differentiates what explicit racism is versus implicit racism. Explicit racism was more prevalent in the past. That is, verbal, physical assaults on people of color based on their race. And here, implicit racial bias is more prevalent today because the former is outlawed, and implicit racial bias affects most adults today because the sheer fact that Black and brown people are overrepresented as criminals and poor persons in social media, movies, forms of entertainment being a big influence, and not enough representation in terms of them, say, serving lead roles as doctors or, lawyers or important, positive people that are esteemed in society. Is not as common for them to be represented that way. So the paper notes this, and it calls for more training, implicit racial bias training for judges. It notes that when judges are made aware of implicit racial bias, that in that way they're able to curb it, because a lot of the time, obviously it's implicit, people don't really know that they are judging by race, because obviously that's not the norm anymore and it is discouraged. And so when people are made aware of this, they refrain from reacting and have a more critical analysis, now having taken in this additional factor. That being that race and gender was also mentioned here does play a factor into how judges adjudicate. This paper is a dangerous idea because it honestly asks the legal system to more critically analyze if our systems are distributing justice in an equitable manner, and if the answer to that is no, then there are some serious legal structures that have to be questioned and adapted to. And for example, this paper notes that not only is making legal professionals aware of this important, but there are structural changes as well that can be implemented to mitigate this phenomenon, and such as implicit racial bias training, diversity in legal teams, or such as improving jury selections. So there is more factors that mitigate implicit racial bias. So yeah, some discussion points I would ask to you is or do you think that there are legal professionals that should have implicit bias training, some legal professionals more than others? Another question I would ask is, should implicit racial bias training only be directed to legal professionals, or should they also be applied to other places in society? And if so, how could you see that helping? Thank you.